In an apparent attempt at appeasing Moscow, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says that he is no longer seeking a NATO membership, an issue that was one of Russia's stated reasons for the invasion. Speaking to an American media outlet, Zelensky also made another concession. He said that he is open to compromise on the status of two breakaway pro-Russian territories in the Donbas region that Putin recognized as independent just days before the invasion. Referring to the NATO membership, Zelensky admitted that he had cooled his expectations when it became apparent that NATO was not prepared to accept Ukraine. He said that the military alliance was afraid of a confrontation with Russia. Zelensky also said that he does not want to be president of a country that is begging for something on its knees. Russia has made it clear that it does not want Ukraine to join NATO, which was created at the start of the Cold War to protect Europe from the Soviet Union. In recent years, NATO has only expanded farther east, infuriating the Kremlin. Russia views NATO enlargement as a threat and wants NATO to withdraw from Eastern Europe. On the issue of Donetsk and Luhansk, Putin recognized them as independent, as two separatist pro-Russian republics in eastern Ukraine, and he wants Ukraine also to recognize it. Zelensky acknowledged those demands, saying he was ready to discuss and find a compromise on how these regions will live on, but also pointed out that the two areas have not been recognized by anyone apart from Russia. Zelensky noted that instead of giving ultimatums, President Putin should start a dialogue to try and find a solution to the ongoing war. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Oli Barat is joining us live from Latvia, and political analyst Andreas Umland is joining us from Berlin. Thank you both for joining us at this hour. I will ask this question to both of you. What do you make of President Zelensky saying he is no longer pressing for NATO membership for Ukraine, which was one of Russia's stated reasons for the invasion? Will that do something to Putin and maybe make him easen up on his aggression? Oli, I will start with you.
Well, I think there will be further questions for the president of Ukraine in the coming days about the exact nature of those statements, exactly what he means, exactly how far he is prepared to go, and all of that will feed into further diplomacy. Of course, we have had confirmation from the Russians today that they do expect the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov to hold talks with his Ukrainian counterpart in Turkey on Thursday. That is an offer that was made by Turkish officials earlier in the week, and Moscow now appears to be saying that those talks will indeed take place. And if they do, those will be the highest level talks that we've seen between Russia and Ukraine since the conflict began. If those talks do take place, they will be likely, I'm sure, to touch on some of the issues that President Zelensky has been raising, because, as you quite rightly say, Russia has all the way through this crisis and before it been very clear that Ukraine's ambition of NATO membership was a major issue for it. The Kremlin has also been clear, heading into those talks between delegations in Belarus, between Russia and Ukraine, that it wants Ukraine to recognize those breakaway regions in the east of Ukraine as independent. That was one of the conditions that the Kremlin has been setting out. So, as I say, as we expect to head into more diplomacy in the coming days, I'm sure that the comments that President Zelensky has been making to US media and in other arenas in recent days, in the last 24 hours or so, will be a focus of those talks.
Andreas, your turn. Do you agree with Oli, and could this be a sign of easing the tensions?
In a way, what we are observing today is a replay of the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements of 2014-2015, when Russia also escalated its war against Ukraine by inserting regular Russian troops into Ukrainian territory, then killing hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers, and then making Ukraine sign deals that Ukraine did not want to sign. Now we have something on a larger scale, of course, with many more victims, with much more damage done. But the principle remains the same. Russia escalates and kills a lot of people and then demands these concessions. And perhaps Zelensky has now come to the conclusion that to drag this further on will just simply destroy. Putin will simply destroy physically more and more Ukrainian cities, kill not only hundreds but thousands and perhaps even tens of thousands of Ukrainians, and that it may now be the best of the bad choices to make these concessions.
Ollie, coming back to you, what measures are being undertaken right now by the Baltic nations to avert the humanitarian or refugee crisis from worsening? And is Europe really ready to handle the surge?
The Baltic nations are very concerned about the humanitarian issues that are unfolding further south in the east of Europe. Here in Latvia, for example, there is not a border with Ukraine, but there is a border with Russia, and there is actually a concern in this country that you might see an exodus of Russian citizens into this country. There is a large Russian minority here in Latvia, Russian-speaking, ethnic Russian. It is a country that very much looks in both directions. Baltic nations insist that they will show Ukraine, but also some of those other European countries, as much support as possible. Whether Eastern Europe is ready for such large numbers is very much an open question. It is certainly aware that millions of people are going to be leaving Ukraine and will be heading into that part of the world. We heard, for example, from Moldova, which is not an EU member state, that it wants more support from the European Union, it wants more support from the United States to help deal with the numbers of people that are coming. In Brussels, there is coordination of EU member states, and you also have the United Kingdom saying that it will help out, that UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, for example, met with leaders from the region yesterday and said that the UK would show support, but Britain is being criticised for not doing enough so far when it comes to refugees. So there is going to be that large influx of people from Ukraine in the coming days, weeks, months. The European Union, member states, countries in Eastern Europe are prepared in the sense that they know what is coming. Whether they're going to have enough resources to deal with the issues very much remains to be seen. The European Union, the United Nations have said that this is going to be a humanitarian crisis, and they believe that this is going to be the largest influx of refugees, the biggest refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War.
Live from Latvia, Ollie Barat, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us. Andreas, coming back to you, the same question goes to you. How is Europe going to handle this refugee influx or refugee crisis?
Well, it depends now whether this concession that Zelensky has now made to Putin will lead to a ceasefire and perhaps even a peace deal. Then I would actually expect that many of these refugees will return to Ukraine because they've left their homes and partly their families also in Ukraine, for instance, elderly people. So I would actually expect then a return of many of these refugees. In a way, that's the best case scenario. The worst or bad case scenario is that the war will continue and then we may get millions and millions of further refugees. And then indeed the question will be how far the generosity and solidarity of the nations of the European Union will actually go after, the 10, 11, 12 million of Ukrainian refugee arrives and the countries come to the limit of their ability to absorb new refugees. So we are now at a sort of watershed, and it could turn out that this will resolve soon, but it could also turn much worse.
Finally, Mr. Andreas, Zelensky says that instead of giving ultimatums, President Putin should start a dialogue to try and find a solution to the ongoing war. But on the contrary, Putin doesn't seem willing to talk. Why do you think that is?
Well, because he so far can do what he does. For instance, the energy exports towards the European Union are still intact. He is apparently Russia is apparently earning 1 billion euros per day from the energy exports towards the European Union, oil, gas, and coal. So Europe has and the US have sanctioned Russia, but the largest income source is still there. There's no NATO involvement in the war, so he probably thinks he can go on and he can exert more concessions. He can perhaps even exert more territory from Ukraine than the current so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, pseudo-states only recognized by Russia and a few other states.
Live from Berlin, Andreas Umland, thank you very much for your insights today and for talking to WION.
Thanks for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.